people who are in talent acquisition, people who are in HR, people who are leaders right now. It's an exciting time to be in leadership. It's an exciting time to be in any role where you are a part of designing the organization, from how we treat people to how we engage folks to how we understand what modern workers need and want so we can get results. Going through the massive changes that technology has brought us to our organizations over the last 10 years.
Welcome to another episode of the peopleHum interview series. I'm your host Sumita Mariam, and let's begin with a quick introduction of peopleHum. peopleHum is an end-to-end one-view integrated human capital management automation platform, the winner of the 2019 Global Cody Award for HCM that is specifically built for crafted employee experiences and the future of work. We run the peopleHum blog and video channel, which receives upwards of 200,000 visitors a year, and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now for our guest, Dawn Burke is the founder and advisor at Burke HR. She's also a senior consultant with Recruiting Toolbox Inc. She's a contributing writer to Fistful of Talent, SHRM, SHRM Next, and Saba Software. We are excited to have the opportunity to interview her today. Welcome, Dawn. We are thrilled to have you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here. This is very exciting.
Wonderful. So let's move on to the interview process now. The first question I have for you, Dawn, let's start with something about your journey that brought you to Burke HR today.
Sure. And Burke HR, of course, is my consultancy. And then naturally, I also am a consultant with Recruiting Toolbox as well. So I think my journey is probably like most people's journey in HR. I did not go to school for HR. I was a theater major of all things. And like every good theater major, when they graduate, about a year later, they realize, wow, I don't want to do this as a living. I want to pay my rent. So you do what all good people do once they graduate. They go get a part-time job at a retail store. And so I was in retail, and I actually moved up the ranks and was in retail management for many years, and was very fortunate that I got to work in very large cities and had great mentors in those areas, which then set me up for a great career in HR. I did what all great retail people do when they get burned out. I tried to figure out what would be a place within a structured corporate environment where I could take those skills that I learned in retail. And it was HR. I was very fortunate that the companies I worked for in my HR career, whether it was intentional or not, they were very forward thinking regarding employee engagement. They, again, whether or not they knew it, they were really trying to create experiences that were good for the employees, knowing that if you treat your employees well, if you bring them something more purposeful to their work life, that they're going to get good results. And so I ended up as a VP of People for a tech company in the city that I live in. And I was afforded the opportunity to do a lot of speaking across the country. I do a lot of writing, as you'd said in the intro. And then I did what every good HR professional after 20 years in the workplace does. I started a consultancy, or I started consulting. And I think a couple of things when I think about this journey. First of all, I was somebody who had an adventuresome spirit. So if a door opened to me, I would walk through it. I usually would try to take that opportunity that, hey, even if I'm scared, I'm going to try something new, right? So that led me to continuing to, try new things, go to different careers, learn new skills. But the real reason why I decided it was time for me to consult was I was thinking about my experiences as somebody new to HR, somebody new to recruiting or talent acquisition, somebody new to the workplace. And there were so many things I wished I would have learned early. So many things that I wished I could have learned about balancing business needs with all of the things that we as human beings need. I saw too many people in the work environment who were they were tired. They did not think that their job was anything more than coming to get a paycheck. And then the ones who did think that they should have some purpose to their career, they were tired. It's like they'd given up. And I just said, that can't be. That is not how it's going to be for the next generations. So that's my journey. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now, is to meet great people like you and get to talk to great folks that you have reached with, to tell them that there's a better way of doing things.
I mean, that's wonderful, to find your calling in HR and just have a purpose for, starting something as a consultancy. That's wonderful. And
sure.
let's talk a little bit about, recruiting now. And according to you, what are the differences, between recruiting for startups versus recruiting for large companies?
Okay, well, I got 2 words for you. Not much. There's really not a lot of difference, which is astounding to me. And I'll tell you what's interesting. When I was in corporate America for 20 years, and again, I was over HR, but I was in small to medium-sized companies. So I was over the recruiting function as well. And so I worked for organizations that were anywhere from people to 2,000 people. Now with Recruiting Toolbox and with some of my consulting work, I am helping talent acquisition teams that are large marquee names, international companies, big companies you buy from. I guarantee it. You're either drinking their coffee or buying stuff off of their websites, right? And what was amazing to me is that there really weren't any differences in a few things. Number one, both of these size organizations, startups or large companies, they want 2 things. They want quality hires and they want them fast. I mean, we can go through all of this stuff. No, they want them fast. You never are going to have a hiring manager go, hey, you know what? You just take as long as you want. If it takes a year, because we want the perfect person, you just take. No, that never happens. That doesn't happen in small companies. It doesn't happen in large companies. I think the major difference between these 2 areas, though, the size, is really what strategy are you going to follow to get those quality hires fast in these different environments. So really you're going to be looking at what's the scope of the organization. A large organization is going to have a lot more hires. And they're going to have probably a larger talent acquisition team that's going to have specialty recruiters, specialty sourcers, like a whole department of sourcers. They might even have project management teams just to help manage recruiting projects. So your scope's going to be different. The strategy might be different. For instance, a larger organization might have to have 2 or 3 or 4 different on the business unit that they are serving. You're going to have one, for instance, that's constantly an evergreen position that's churning and churning and churning. That's always open. That's going to be a different strategy than what you're going to do for executive recruiting. And then the last difference is really going to probably be in the amount of resources you have. Larger companies sometimes, not all the time, have more resources for recruiting. I'm surprised in a lot of regards, though, how little resources these larger companies have. That said, they might have more internal resources. They might have a whole recruitment marketing team that can help them. All right, so they might have different resources, or they might have more technology. All right, but the reality is those are all kind of like peripheral things almost. I hate to say it in that term. The reality is that there are more things that these 2 groups have in common, large versus small. And the biggest obstacle that both of these groups have is with alignment. Yeah. Keeping all of the stakeholders aligned. Keeping the recruiters, anybody who's interviewing, the hiring manager, the CEO, everybody aligned with the process. What each interviewer is supposed to be focusing on. Because a lot of the times we just have peer interview groups and we just say, yeah, just interview them. Well, what are they supposed to be focusing on? What's their area of expertise? Is everybody asking the same questions? Everybody has to be aligned on the realities of compensation. I mean, so many times, a recruiter is, told to post a 10-year-old job description with 10-year-old requirements, then gets from compensation that, no, you're going to have to only pay this much. But then they do market data and show that really, no, you need $50,000 more. Everybody is just off the page. So you have to be sure all of these compensation requirements are together. And also you have to really be aligned on what is your employer's story. Like, what are you selling? What makes you different from your competitors? Why would anybody want to come work for you? And if the recruiter's saying something from the hiring manager who's saying something different from the CEO who might be recruiting, that's a problem. Also, one of the biggest areas where both of these groups are misaligned is just understanding the business needs. They're not a part of the conversations every quarter of here's what we're doing, here's what we're changing, here's where we need to pivot. And so their recruiters are being put in kind of a reactionary position as opposed to one that's a little bit more credible. And I think one last thing I'll say, because I could obviously go on about this forever, is that large companies and small companies, the biggest thing all of them have to get aligned on with all the stakeholders is, why does any of it matter? I mean, really, why? I can't remember for a long time, or for most of my career, where we would sit down and say, let's really talk about this hire and why this is important. Or let's really talk about why we have this step in the process and how this is going to make your life easier. Let's really get down to, why are we saying we should only pay this much? Is that going to be to your advantage? Maybe it is. Or is it going to be to your disadvantage? Well, why is that? We don't get down to the why we are doing stuff because we're just cranking. So wrap it up. Are there differences between recruiting for startups versus large companies? Sure. Scope, strategy, resources will be different. But the big similarity is, no matter what size, there really is challenges with alignment. And until you get that fixed, all the rest is really not going to matter anyway.
Wow. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, we have to ask the right questions as to, what's challenging us and where we need to correct ourselves. I think that's where a lot of organizations are, missing out. They're just going with the flow and just following a lot of, orders that we have. So, just as an extension to that question, organizations have a lot of hiring restrictions. So how can you balance the organizational goals with the hiring restrictions that we have?
All right. So this one is a tough one for me. I mean, this is a tough one. I mean, this could be 2 whole days seminars of company goals versus kind of your hiring goals. And the way that I'm interpreting hiring restrictions is, hey, here's the budget we have. Here's what we've said that we can hire for. Here's the number of people we can, and we probably have to work within some guide rails. We have some restrictions about who we can hire, how we can hire, and the money we have to hire for, these sort of things. So the first part of this goes, how do you balance company goals with hiring restrictions / goals? The reality is one begets the other. You cannot have hiring goals or restrictions, guardrails, budgets approved, until the organization is crystal clear. And I use the word crystal very deliberately, crystal clear on what their organizational goals and outcomes are. And I've been somebody who's been on an executive team, and I say this with all due respect, it's very hard to do that. It is difficult. It's more difficult than anybody knows for organizational leaders to get together and really create succinct, clear goals. This is what we're going to accomplish. Here is how we think we're going to accomplish it. And here's how each department is going to contribute to creating these goals. Right? A lot of organizational leaders don't know how to do that. It's that simple. Doesn't matter how expert they are in their role or how tenured they are, or how much money they make. A lot of them don't know how to do that, number one. Number two, a lot of them don't know what strategy is. I mean, if I gave somebody 10 people, tell me what strategy is. What's your definition of strategy? You'd get 10 different definitions. And so there's some of that, they don't know what they don't know. But the other issue too is the speed of change at work is so immense that even ones that can create great strategies and go through a process of this is what it's going to be for 6 months and a year. A lot of them, the speed of change is so outrageous that within a few months, that strategy's gone. Work conditions have changed. Hey, we just merged with a new company and we have a whole new leadership team. So everything's changed. Hey, we've got a competitor that just dropped an awesome product. And guess what? We've got to now change our whole direction. That could happen. Hey, how about this one? Try this one on for size. We have a global pandemic, and tomorrow everybody's working from home and we're shutting down half of our operations. All right. Now, I think that brings it to home, though, regarding the speed of change right now. Now, I think what's interesting, though, is we talk about the pandemic, and we should. This was something that we failed to imagine could even happen, right? So right now it's top of mind about how things can change very quickly and how it's going to change your strategy. But let's be honest. Let's look back last year, if you were in a corporate environment, in the year before, pretty much every year in my corporate career as an executive, there was something big that happened that changed strategy. 3 equity flips, new private equity groups, mergers and acquisitions, new products, losing a customer. We couldn't keep a strategy in place for more than 3 months before everything switched. All right, so back to how does this impact your hiring? Well, naturally, this is going to impact your hiring substantially. If the company hasn't built in some sort of flexibility with how we look at hiring and how we look strategically at filling roles, whether we need to upscale or downscale. I think it's been a misstep for a lot of organizations. They kind of look at the people side, and these are good organizations who like their people and want to do good things. But if something changes, their gut reaction is, let's just lay off people.
Yeah.
I say that, of course, they think through it. They don't want to do that. But it seems easier to do that than to say, we're going to actually just quit using this $400,000 software product that we're using to help. We'll find another way. We'll flex on that software product versus we're flexing on human beings. So there seems to be, it seems like the people side, the hiring side, feels a little more like a commodity that can be upscaled or downscaled more than other things in an organization. So it seems like it's easier to retract or contract your talent. So before I continue to talk in a big circle on this, I'd like to say that the best way that you can balance those things is if the talent acquisition leaders are talking quarterly with the overall business leaders and being in front of changes, being a part of the strategic talks. Also, I think the hiring talent acquisition team must have in place, here's a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. Yeah. Here's what our status quo is going to be. But guess what? If all of a sudden there's a big change, how do we as a department flex to that? For instance, pandemic happens. We don't have to hire anybody anymore. So what are we going to do? Okay, well, guess what? 3 of you, we might not need anymore. Well, how about instead of us immediately just laying them off, saying, here are some things we then can provide value for in a different department. Maybe we can help with call center and customer support. Maybe we can take our skills and help with some of the HR initiatives. So we need to think about how do we flex and then not only their own value, but then also, if are there other contingent plans we can have, like using an RPO, staffing agency, other things that we can augment our services based on restrictions or based on great additional needs. So, sorry, that's a hard one for me though. It's hard.
But you gave a wonderful answer. So I would like to ask your opinion on something that, a lot of organizations are facing now. So we've been forced to recruit over video interviews now. What is your opinion on that? Do you think we can sustain video interviewing even post the pandemic?
The short answer to can we sustain video interviewing post-pandemic? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There's no reason why we wouldn't sustain it. And, you asked my opinion on video interviewing. I love it. I think video interviewing is great. Video interviewing is nothing new. A lot of people now, it's new to them. But video interviewing's been around for 10 years, probably much more prevalent the last 5-6 years. When I was VP of People several years ago, I used video interviewing for our organization, and it was very successful. I will say there are great advantages to video interviewing, and there are disadvantages. All right. So when I think about video interviewing, the advantages to me are that it's very accessible. Very accessible. For instance, where are you right now?
I'm in India.
Right. And I'm in Birmingham, Alabama. And check it out. We're doing a video interview. Who knew? I mean, it's awesome, right? Who knew? It's very accessible. It's super efficient. You just can do things more quickly. It's that simple. Also, I think in a lot of ways it can create a better candidate experience in a few ways. For instance, it saves them an immense amount of time. The candidate does not have to take off work, come up with that excuse to their boss why I gotta leave for half a day. They don't have to drive to the location, get stuck in traffic. They don't have to do any of that stuff. They just go home and there we are. So in that regard, the candidate experience can be better. Disadvantages. Well, the big one is that technology can be a hot mess, like a real hot mess. I mean, at any time now, probably my connection will drop, right? We'll be talking and it's just going to go black and we're like, what happened? And of course, you've got people who right now are just new to video interviewing and candidates who are going to be uncomfortable seeing themselves on video or interviewers, and their mute button will be on and their face will be like over here while they're talking. And so that can be frustrating. I will say there's an easy solve for that though. We have to train our hiring managers to not care about that. I mean, who cares? If this person's job isn't have anything to do with video or being good on video, then who cares? Just help them through it. All right. But tech can be difficult. The other thing I found too is that with video interviewing, it can be extremely easy for hiring managers to cancel interviews at the last minute. It's not as easy for a hiring manager to cancel that interview if the person drove 2 hours to the interview and they're standing in the lobby.
Yeah.
But when it's like, we already know that that's a struggle with hire. I've been a hiring manager, and yes, there's been times where I've canceled interviews when I didn't want to. Horrible. It's a horrible thing. It's a horrible practice, but it happens. A lot easier if you can do it on video. All right. So there's advantages and there's disadvantages. But here's the truth. It really doesn't matter if you do video interviewing or if you do phone interviewing or if you do live interviewing. None of those are going to work if you don't have your process in place, if you're not aligned already, if you don't have all those things we talked about, don't have your interviewers who are skilled, or they don't know what they're supposed to ask, or nobody knows about the compensation and nobody knows what they're selling. What's the candidate experience? In that regard, video interviewing, for all of its pluses, is not a magic bullet fix. Particularly when you're saying, why are we video interviewing? Well, we want quality hires and we want them quickly. So you still have all those rules of everything else. That said, I love video interviewing. Yeah, it's not going away. I mean, it just won't, because now there's too many interviewers, AKA also executives, who are like, oh my God, this is awesome. I wished I wouldn't have been such a chicken before to do it. So yeah, video interviewing's here. It's here.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of different perspectives in one answer. That was wonderful, Dawn. And just to kind of, wrap up the interview process, if you have any last sound bites that you would like to leave our audience.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think I do. Keep the faith. No, let's see here. I think what I would just say to people who are in talent acquisition, people who are in HR, people who are leaders right now, it's an exciting time to be in leadership. It's an exciting time to be in any role where you are a part of designing the organization, from how we treat people to how we engage folks to how we understand what modern workers need and want so we can get results. Going through the massive changes that technology has brought us to our organizations over the last 10 years. But now even some of the things that we're going to be learning through the pandemic. Right now is that time, because it's an exciting time. I would say use this very bizarre yet interesting time through the pandemic to start experimenting with things that could help you get to that next normal. Not the new normal, by the way. Abolish new normal. There's no. The new normal will last for about 30 seconds. So it's, let's try things now that will help us as this next normal comes into play. And I would say recruiting, talent acquisition, HR, leadership's very hard. Very, very hard. But I think if you can think beyond the basics, the tactics, the compliance, look at it that the roles that you are playing in the organization as those folks is really creating some career changing and life changing experiences for employees. So stick with it.
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much, Dawn. I mean, I've had a great experience talking to you for the past 30 minutes or so. It was, it's such an honor to have you here, and thank you so much for your time and your energy to, come to this interview series and give this interview for us. I will keep in touch with you and have a healthy and safe time ahead of you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. And same to you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you.